Hello, everybody. It is a beautiful night here in the Washington, D.C. area. Hello, I am Henry Crawford, and welcome to Poets versus the Pandemic. This is a series devoted to poets whose books have come out during this time of coronavirus and sheltering in place. Tonight, we're featuring poet Kathleen Winter, who will be reading from her new book, Transformer. And we're also got two great guest poets, Majda Gama and Luther Jett. Before we begin, I want to thank the WordWorks and Cafe Muse for helping to sponsor this series, and I want to thank each and every one of you out there for coming in and joining us tonight. Okay, so let's get a few things out of the way first. Most importantly, if you want to purchase the poet's books, please click on the green button below. That green button will lead to links where you can actually purchase the poet's books. And that, of course, is an important part of Poets versus the Pandemic, because the readers in this series have books that did not come out in the normal way where we could have put them on in normal readings. So now, if you want to ask questions of our poets, you can click on the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen while the reading is going on, and you can also read other people's questions and vote on the ones you want to hear most. So don't be shy. Here at PVP, we really enjoy questions from the people, from the audience, and I'll try to get to as many of them as we can if we have time. Also, remember that you are not on camera, so don't worry about mics or cameras or the room you're in, but please make use of the lively chat feature to comment on the performances. And please bear with us if we experience technical difficulties, these glitches. These online readings are a bit like the early days of live television. So just please bear with us if we have any of those. A couple more things. Please join us for our next Poets versus the Pandemic reading on July 15, 2020, which will feature yours truly, Henry Crawford, and I'll be reading from my new book, The Binary Planet. And please come back to our next Cafe Muse reading, which is going to happen on Monday, July 6, 2020, which will feature poets Tracy Brimhall and Bertie Zenhauser. And remember, if you want to come back and enjoy this reading again, just click on the same link you used to get here. The reading will be archived, and you'll have another shot at buying books through the green button. Oh, and you can sign up for all of our readings that I just mentioned by going over to our channel, and I put the link to WordWorks Books channel in the chat, so feel free to do that. All right, so Kathleen Winter. There we go. Let's see if we can get her up here. Kathleen Winter is the author of Transformer, published by WordWorks in 2020. Her second collection, I Will Not Kick My Friends, won the Elixir Poetry Prize, and her debut collection, Nostalgia for the Criminal Past, won the Texas Institute of Letters Bob Bush Award and the Antivenom Poetry Prize. Her poems have appeared widely in journals, including the New Republic, New Statesman, and several others. Winter is an associate editor at 32 Poems and teaches creative writing at Sonoma State University and Santa Rosa Junior College. And without any further ado, as they say, I will turn the Crowdcast stage over to Kathleen Winter.
Thank you so much, Henry. And thank you so much, everybody who's participating in this. And welcome to my backyard. I'm sitting outside because this is the place where my internet signal is the strongest. And this is my first ever web reading. So I'm pretty nervous, actually. And I'm also super excited to get to read from my new book. This is the first reading that I've been able to give from Transformer, which came out on the WordWorks press in March, right in time for the coronavirus. So I'm gonna read soon, but first I'm trying to figure out how to make myself get further away on this giant screen. And I want to thank people who I really feel super grateful to, including Nancy White, my editor at the WordWorks, and Maggie Smith, who chose the book to be published, and 32 Poems, who nominated the book. And I really thank all of you guys. And I also want to thank Majda Gama and Luther Jett for reading with me, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their work soon. As soon as I finish reading, they'll read. And of course, Cafe Muse and Henry Crawford for making this possible. So before I start reading from this book, I wanted to show it to you real quick because I really like the cover. And it's done by a painter named Fred Tomaselli, whose work is, I think, really gorgeous. So I was excited that he let me use the cover art. And the other thing I want to say is I'd like to dedicate the reading today to my brother and Ray and my sister-in-law Frances, who recently got married. So before we start too, there's one more thing I really have to acknowledge, and that's the state of our nation and the incredible injustices that have been going on ever since we became a country and before, and also the crazy state of our judicial system right now. It concerns me greatly as somebody who practiced law for 13 years and reading the paper, as I'm sure most of you do. A lot of you probably share my alarm and indignation. So I just wanted to have a brief moment to encourage everybody to vote. Do what you can to make a change here. So on the political note, I will start with some political poems. The political issue that I write about in this book is actually gendered violence, violence against women, and domestic violence. And as somebody who's experienced sexual assault and domestic violence, I write about this from the inside. But I also want to write about other things. I don't want to have like a giant book all about that. So the first section of the book is poems about these issues. And then the other 3 sections are about different things that I'll tell you a little bit about as we go through. So the first poem in the book is a poem called South Huntington Apartments. And you were breathless in the laundry room, hiding behind a closet door, ajar, listening for him to take the cellar stairs. Is it possible he was frightened he might kill you? You could see his shoes through the strip between hinges, high tops that looked innocent even when he kicked you. Rounded rubber at the toes is stiff, can bruise a shin, thigh. Hell, what's not soft enough to blacken when you're 24? Your ears, eyes are accurate, are sharp and clear. You stare at green laces wrapped over his ankles. Horses drown in the molasses time that floods a shadow-tinted room until his fear spins him around and up the cement stairs, a chemical wind rising to find some spark to light it. 3 flights up he sprints, but you just need to gain 1 floor to leave. You just need 1 story, and it isn't his. So there are poems in the book that are kind of imagined. I don't really think of poetry as being nonfiction. So this poem I imagine taking place on a military base, and we know that there's more domestic violence happening in military bases and military communities even than in the general community. It's already a big problem in the general community. And the pandemic has reportedly made things worse for people who are in these kind of situations. So it's just something that we have to think about, I think, and try to improve upon in our culture, in our society. So this poem is called Holes in Drywall Made by a Fist. Holes in drywall made by a fist are uneven, erode. They leak steadily, steadily, dust. What arguments gave rise to them, you ask? These craters, pocking walls to the side of windows. Holes make a living room appear askew, deranged. Whoever wanted out couldn't get there. Or maybe they were made to scare a lover. She froze, amazed, the first time he swung for the wall. Jaw clenched, and on impact, the fight flooded out of her. Limp now, not even screaming, dazed, taking in the concrete nature of her fear, a dense and solid thing she knows must fit inside her brain, despite its size, refrigerator weight, its trick of slipping into dreams she'll have all week of dust, propelled in storms across the base, the sure report of her erasure. So the last poem from this first section, the last poem I'll read from this violence ridden section, is something that was sparked by looking at a sign. And I know a lot of you all are poets and writers, and I've always thought it's uncanny and fun to just see what inspires us and how random it can be. And just for me, a lot of times what inspires me are little scraps of language, just a few words will do it. So this poem is called Bystanders. His knives were swift, as were his wives. The drawer where they were kept was always cold. Their feet passed briskly on the street. We couldn't meet their eyes. No word flew from one to the next, no omen. We marveled at his skill in using them through and through and through. On hallway walls or posted on a pole along the road, signs say, if you see something, but we saw so little as sunlight hit metal. Belt buckle, brass knuckle, each wife's slight, shadowed in the wake of him. Once they went in, we never saw them again. And now we're going to switch sections to the second of the 4 sections of the book. And this is a more familial, family-oriented section. Has some poems from childhood. And the first poem that I'll read is set in Port Aransas, Texas. I grew up in San Antonio. And my family would go down to the Gulf Coast sometimes, and we would go to the ferry at Port Aransas to go to the barrier island, Mustang Island. And my brother and I used to like to stand on the ferry and look out and see if we could find dolphins or other fish. And so and it's also an oil and gas area, so you can smell the petrochemicals in the air. So this poem is called My Port Aransas. My ultramarine fevers, triggers, was it errors? My incessant pump jacks, rubber-footed divers, polychrome dividers, birthstones of faceted glass. My autoimmune shivers, spineless jellyfish endeavors, horsehead levers, my depthless, my lakes glittering of spillage, skimmed with liquid plumage leaked in prophet's homage, smashed flat plastic bottles, shreds of tow rope in the boat's bow, underlying atmospheres of chemical diffusion, blanketing the dolphinated channel, torpid, fairy-stitched, crepuscular, my fuchsia swollen teenage moon misfiring to defy it all. And then this next poem is set in Colorado, where my husband Greg and I had a vacation incident a few years ago where we had our 14-year-old Labrador Retriever in the car, and we blew out 2 of our tires, and it was Father's Day, and it was kind of in the country, and it was hard to get a rescue tow truck driver person to come out on a holiday. And we ended up getting this pretty crazy, super young tow truck driver. And in the poem, I turned my husband into my brother. So it's kind of an elegy for my dad, and it's called Colorado Flats. Yesterday, we passed a wolf who lives outside a rental in Glen Haven. Faded gray, lanky as a pole. Imagine a pack of him chasing you over snow. Broke folks sure keep tough animals. On the road to Marble, a rock, invisible in sunset, sacrificed 2 tires. The guy who came for us in the wrecker brought a pit without a collar, laid his head in my lap as Travis drove us up and down the pass at speeds a rabid man would choose, too punk to hold what he has to lose. The lab rode the wrecker's bed in the trashed sedan, glaucous and confused, his eyes on ours as we stepped away into the cab. We were scared to ask him to slow down, this blonde kid we were paying. You in the front seat, me in back, wondering if we'd make it till supper. It was the second Father's Day without our father. Changed by the diving sun, the air turned uncomfortable in color. Who knows what fatherlessness drove our driver? The universe has a horizon beyond which we cannot see. And then this next poem I want to dedicate to my dear friend Don. And hey, Don. And this is a poem that's set in San Francisco, so it's also for Eva and Tom and all my other San Francisco Bay Area people who will recognize Ocean Beach and the Cliff House and the buffaloes in Golden Gate Park. And it's a sort of a throwback to the days when the Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge had actual people taking the tolls instead of machines. So it's called City Eye Elegy. A toll taker's makeup is perfect. Bridge is the beginning of the city, waves lick its feet. After her cubby, a tunnel, pale blue eye, then shut, then sky, how lids of the car cans glimmer. Little dogs kicking back dust in the sidewalk, crosswalk. If my lover were blind, would I dye my hair green? Is there only one lover in this world to please? My other died a year ago. Since then, the long fringe on a very long shawl, or is it a tunnel, or is it a well? My mind digs toward his painless heaven. Cities thick with garments, ties making their men disciplined, wingtips keeping their feet on the ground. Riding while driving, I have to be short. I have to be short all the time. I look at you and think you're my height, but I'm 5'3" with the ambition of a virus or Rotarian. As a girl, I was a Rotarian, a red-haired Rotarian in running shorts at 6 a.m., Lisa Yee and me and 50 men, a cold buffet. That was in a little city, 3 careers away, place of too many grapes. Now I'm in the park with a windmill, Ocean Beach, home to fragile baby buffalo who panic in their pasture when the smaller dog digs in, smash into fence posts, break ribs, and cry. So discipline descends again for little dogs, long ties and shorter tunnels. Walking towards water, where a vision of the original cliff house persists invisibly on the horizon. Now my absent other with me in the phantom Victorian tower, sighting these passing strange pairs of whales migrating, fathers and daughters. So that's for my dad. So we're switching now into this third section of the book, which is inspired by other artworks, paintings, sculpture, music, other writing. And the first poem in here is more or less based on a painting that I really love, but I changed it a lot. And so if you look at the picture online, you'll notice there are quite a few changes. It's in the Thyssen Museum in Madrid, and it's painted by a painter. His name is Beurer, B-E-U-R-E-R, and it's painted in like 1487, I think. And the subject matter, it's a portrait with a rich person named Ruckingen, a rich man. So the poem is called An Old Man in Great Trouble. The famished ermine trimming the patrician's coat was meant as an emblem of wealth. Is this the real-time sorrow? And how did Beurer bring it out on the patron's face through brumal medieval afternoons when they sit near each other as still as two lemons, fire thinned, the stubborn paint thickening like an adolescent's neck? Licking a brush, the painter brings in a worker from the farmyard below the windowsill, where Ruckingen rests his hand, the jewel in his ring pushing out of the canvas. What is the life of a poor man, the least bit lit at the tip of a stick of incense, whose name isn't on the frame's plate, his knee cocked, who leans over a wall, stares at a ruin on the horizon, fly-sized, both man and castle. He's supposed to be raking, but his mind is paralyzed, like a cart's wheel half sunk in mud. Is it his illness, unidentified, or the antique disaster of his father's maiming, or another more general trouble, too great to contain in one homunculus? Undulating invisibly over the expanse, dormant fields backed by foothills, then the inexorable elevations, each layer colder and darker of blue. And then a few poems more. I'm going to read you 4 more poems. And the last one I'll read from this section, this ekphrastic art about art section, is based on a book that I bet a lot of you guys have read. It's Guns, Germs, and Steel that Jared Diamond wrote, and it came out quite a few years ago, but I read it late, and I really liked it. I thought it was really amazing. It's an anti-racist book. It's a super informative book about anthropology, and it's really well written. So the book is, I think, still totally worth reading. And the title of the poem is Chronicle Beyond the Waves. Threading 7 archipelagos of regret, we sewed tools between layers of ash. What's practical was rare, so we traded stones and flesh of fruit among our nests of island. A journey inside one long tree through the sea is a clean suicide in famine. If we came back, we were welcomed with a feast. Last of the oysters, last of the turbaned shell dwellers, blue lobsters. When a pestilence descended, our mammals scratched wells into their flanks with untrimmed claws. Our beds became worthless, were burned. Dying was boring, and it took all our time. When the elders were stricken, we felt like ruined knives. We sensed it long after they'd gone. Daily, we knew it as we starved, too weak to speak. While we waited, we dreamed of how we'd passed language among us, adding to it. Twitching an eyebrow, we could turn a word into its opposite. With words, we'd made objects into gods, and women into objects. With words, we'd wrenched land and plants from each other and made theft legitimate until the crops were gone. Then we fed on regret, hard between our teeth, like the sand mixed into our last bites of food. So this last section of the book has a lot of poems about relationships, and not always mine, thankfully. And the first poem is an ode. So that's a poem about a lot of times waking up either with your lover or missing your lover, so that your lover's gone or that you're going to have to part. And this one is single-handed ode. Don't know why till 10 o'clock, but that's what my body wanted, and who am I to deny it? There was a wet groove of moss, vivid, and I bathed lengthwise in it, abetted by a stream. There was an English estate, country house so well ruined you couldn't tell if you were indoors or out. There was Mrs. Gaskell, as a biographer imperfectly explained, and someone was holding a fundraiser, or Mrs. Gaskell. The cakewalk was over long before its charm. Coffee cold at 10 o'clock, and the Puritan ethic failed free and clear. No mitigation. Lassitude and delay claim another morning. I'm stalled in the kitchen, burning the last pot in an ancient race shirt. Not even a negligee. Not even a drive-by. Not even the mid-century's appropriating gaze. And then I will now warn Henry that I am going to read the last 2 poems that I'm going to read. And I want to thank you all for listening. I totally appreciate it. So this poem, I want to send this out to my friend Anne, because she's reading Hilary Mantel's 3rd book in the trilogy about Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell. And so am I with Greg. And this one is called Henry VIII, and it's mainly based on their first novel, Wolf Hall. Always a bridegroom, never the bride to suffice. When you're picking them on the basis of paintings, mistakes will be made. I'd hoped for someone with a sense of humor, but humors were all they had. I'd hoped for a princess who spoke my language, but the high-class bachelorettes were Spanish, Flemish, French. For God's sake, why can't men birth the children? I could have stayed with Catherine #1, her nails so quick at finding lice. Consider our 20 years of hunts and banquets, all the ermines, foxes I gave her, pearls and jewels that had to be reset, regifted, carved with Anne's, Jane's, Anne's, Catherine H's, Catherine P's initials entwined with mine. All the waiting, legal language, all the waste. Executioners in Calais have a new precision instrument. Technology makes everything too easy. Swipe left to cut off a head. And then the last poem I'll leave you with was a poem that I wrote when I had this amazing, joyful time for the semester Thanks to the Texas Institute of Letters and the University of Texas, I was the fellow at the Dobie Paisano Ranch at the end of 2015 in that fall semester. And I get to live by myself on this incredible ranch that had a zillion and one animals. So, and wrote a lot of poetry. So this is one of the poems I wrote. And Michael Adams is the brilliant person that runs that program, who I adore. So this is for him. The porch roof's sky blue ceiling. Looking to be moved, the gravel pathway vanished into moonlessness. Not before a black hose bisected it in the porch zone light. Fear of little breaches, slice in the heel through which seeps the soul's red light. Fear of trivial experience, waste of the unknown quantity of summer nights. Be moved by the porch roof's pale blue painted ceiling if you're an insect, dissuaded from staking your claim. Mud daubers stinglessly pass through the breached green door screen, searching for a ceiling, not a sky. I trapped myself in wariness, housing contingency in an anxious eye. Old as I am, still dumb, why won't I say it? The key is hidden, always, someplace terribly obvious, under the only blooming thing on the front porch. Inside an iron horse, just right of the front door, this wink in the mind's smoky mirror, this love of the first person passing. Thank you. So now we get to hear the other readers.
Yes, you do, but not without me saying that was a terrific reading. And thank you so much for the political poem. As you said at the outset, this is a very disturbing time that we're going through. So witnessing it and naming it is very important. Thank you so much. And now I shall bring up Majda Gama, our next reader, and I will bring her up. And when that is happening, I shall bring Kathleen down.
Hi.
Hi, Majda. How you doing?
I think I have a new favorite poet, and that's Kathleen Winter.
Yeah. I think that was a pretty impressive. I think she's one of my favorites now as well.
Yes.
Majda Gama is a Beirut-born Saudi American poet based in the Washington, D.C. area, where she has roots as a DJ and activist. Her poetry has appeared in numerous publications, including the Fairy Tale Review, Hunger Mountain, Nimrod, the Normal School, RHINO, and is forthcoming from the Minola Review, as well as the Hobb anthology. Majda has twice been nominated for Best of the Net and serves as poetry editor at Tinderbox Poetry Journal. And I will say, Majda, take it away.
All right, I have about 5 minutes, so I will time myself so I don't step on Luther's toes, because Luther is a very dynamic reader. I have two poems to read. One is sort of 4th of July-ish. It's about girlhood in the 70s, if you will. It's called Pomegranate Seeds. Blessed with sticky feet from climbing pine trees and the power of a David Cassidy album in the front window to shake the neighborhood boys from our step. Boys that front with their kiss action figures, but drop like Superman exposed to kryptonite when confronted with my kissing Barbie. Companions on the tree limbs, back on neighborhood turf, we repel like the ends of magnets. They want to rock and roll all night while I dance to ABBA. Summer days and every home an open door. I walk barefoot on hot asphalt to swimming pools, sip on honeysuckle blooms in the woods, play kick the can at twilight, torch morning glories while hamburgers grill on the 4th of July. My parents drink their beers. They let me hold punks and light the fountains. On the other side of the world, a pomegranate ripens, soon to be split in half and wrung of all its seeds. This next poem is forthcoming from Minola Review, and it was a finalist for their contest. They're a feminist Canadian journal, and I think they're pretty wonderful. And this poem is more about the present moment in American history, and it addresses these sort of a hyphenated experience that a lot of Arab Americans or Indian American or any sort of brown hyphen American has experienced in the post 9/11 America. This is called "Why Aren't You Just American?" What is asked is not a question a brown body can answer, because that body is busy being brown. That body is in flight or in fight. That body is continually liminal, a limb extended toward or to greet, or a swift foot booking, but not too fast. The body is always polite, because a body from Appalachia can be Scots Irish, and that's a heritage, a birthright, a calling, a place to be on a long summer evening by a creek bed, a hollow near a mining town that sang Europe into the mountains. A brown body can walk across a landmass, lay herself down as a bridge, erase a tongue the color saffron, and be foreign for generations. Yellow sings here, red and brown and spice. My body walked all the striations of rock in the Badlands, burned under the sun over the Snake River. Brown can be pale too. And spice, didn't you ever drink tea made from prairie grass or a bohemian beer in Chicago? The brown body isn't worth much. A small museum in Detroit, a name that catches in others' throats like a fine bone. You rise up at the wrong time, and they smile with white teeth while picking you apart for too many consonants in your name, for praying with cupped hands, for leaving to visit your ancestors and coming back. Why don't you just stay over there? I answer. Don't you hear my answer? Thank you, Henry, Kathleen, and Cafe Muse, and Luther Jet. And thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you, Majda. When is that going to come out, that one? Is it next month or two?
July, in the summer issue of the Minola Review.
Okay, great. I can't wait to take a look at that. That'll be wonderful. All right, so let's bring up Luther Jet, our final guest poet for the day, and let's bring him out. Luther, you've got camera, you've got mic, you got it all. How are you doing? You okay?
I'm good.
All right, so let's say that Luther Jet, Luther Jet, is a native of Montgomery County, Maryland, and a retired special educator. His poetry has been published in numerous journals as well as several anthologies. He is the author of 2 poetry chapbooks, not quite, Poems Written in Search of My Father, Finishing Line Press in 2015, and Our Situation. A third chapbook, Everyone Disappears, is slated for release in fall of 2020 by Finishing Line Press. So Luther, you may be a poet in the pandemic. Hopefully not. Let's hope that the book comes out in better times. Luther, I am going to turn the stage over to you and have at it.
All right. I will start with a pandemic poem. Natana Toketh is a prayer which is said at Yom Kippur. It's probably all you need to know. For Scythia, sun yellow and blue, afternoon beyond my window, a chill day, early April, those who will live and those who will not live still walk the same path between maples, tinted scarlet, faded cherries, sparrows nestle, streets empty, distant wail of sirens, ram's horn calls each to station. We are caught in this thicket, and who will stay the knife in its glint, its downward arc? Here's a poem that I really wish could become obsolete, but I don't think it will anytime too soon. Spinning after Charlottesville, August 2017. In a moment, you hang suspended in midair before the inevitable grind of asphalt against flesh. Consider what it took to reach this instant. Here, the world spun upside down. It is as if a bad dream ensnared you, waking to another dream and another until you recognize your situation with a jolt and waken cold, drenched in sweat. You are not dreaming. You are not. That car didn't drive itself. And lastly, here is a poem from that upcoming chapbook, which is supposed to come out in the fall, and I very much hope it is delayed until spring. Why the Ocean Tastes of Tears. Everyone goes away. Everyone disappears. That should not surprise anyone. It comes with the ticking of clocks in upstairs halls, with shadows of afternoons that turn golden before fading, and the last star left shining between the midnight west and bomb-dark dawn. My mother cries at her kitchen sink, and the girl I argued with washes out her paintbrushes in a room I have never seen. Voices fill the air. Small birds go south. The snow melts slowly. Everyone disappears. When you most want them to stay, everyone goes somewhere else, and that is why the ocean tastes of tears. It's the one thing you can count on. When you close your eyes, you dream, and if anyone is still there when you wake, you've witnessed the revolution. Thank you. And thank you, Henry, and thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Luther. Very good. Now let's see if we can bring the all the poets back up here. This is, there we go. And let me get our Majda back up. And here we are. All right. Thank you all. It was just a terrific program. And we have some questions. So let's see what we can do with these questions. And if you in the audience have any other questions, you can hit that ask a question button, and and then we'll take them up here. But the first one, I actually am going to do this this second one that we got from Frances Sally, I believe how you pronounce her last name, and she says of Kathleen's work, I so appreciate how you meld the personal and the political. So that to me is an interesting question on how do you what is your approach in melding the personal and the political?
Well, probably we can all answer this one. But I think I don't know what to say really. I mean, I mostly, if I'm writing about political issues, I think I usually mostly try to write about things I have some kind of personal experience with, because otherwise I feel like I might be stepping on somebody else's toes or sort of inserting myself where I shouldn't be inserting myself. Although I can think immediately of some poems I've written that, don't follow that description. So the current events and what's going on right now, I have not been writing a whole lot about race because I don't feel like I'm the right person to write about race. I write about things that infuriate and appall me sometimes and get me so angry I want to write about them. But then I also write by inspiration. Like I was saying, like a lot of times I write because like something sparked it, some image or some piece of language. And, a lot of times, so a lot of what I write about isn't political at all. I'd love to hear what Luther and Majda have to say about that.
So would I. Majda, you want to take a shot at that? How do you meld and merge the political and the personal in your work?
I mean, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's something I think about a lot, because I just seem to be, after 9/11, I was no matter, everything I did was political. It was like a big dividing line in my life. So even though I didn't mean to, I was often writing political poems. So I think that for people who are interested in writing political poems at this point in time, you can really do it in very different ways. You can do it slant. You can do it with some craft to your writing without having to use big sweeping language or binary language. You can really make it about the moment, or just about something minute, or just pick an object that, like a physical object, like, the mask that we're all wearing when we leave the house, and sort of let that do the talking, and in a way that sort of helps dilute the moment so that you can address it with language that isn't cliche or over the top or too sweeping. Because almost any poem at this point in time can really be political if you want it to be.
Very good. Luther, how about you?
That's my opinion. I think about it a lot too, so it's a good question.
Luther, how do you do it?
Well, yeah, what Kathleen and Majda said, but I would also add the personal is political. And it's how I don't set out to write political poems. I used to do that, and it always felt like a diatribe to me. So if something hits me in a certain way, like that photograph of the impact of the car in Charlottesville, it just, it was so disturbing. And that poem came out of my personal response to that. So I think that, I'm kind of an imagist poet, and I don't really do political, except that all three of the things that I read tonight were political.
Very good. Let's see what we got. We got a few now. Ann Goldman has a question. She would like to, I would love to hear you read the Bosch poem, and if you like, to discuss its genesis.
I don't know if we have time for that. It's pretty short, but I'd be happy to read it if we have time, Henry.
I think we got time.
Okay. So the Bosch poem. Okay, this is a creepy one, so I'm glad that I'm so glad to get to read it. Actually, I think it's one of the creepiest poems I've ever written, and it came from reading nonfiction. And I love to read nonfiction to be inspired. I find it sometimes more inspiring than reading other poets, because I'm always afraid I'll steal from other poets, whereas I don't feel quite as nervous about stealing from nonfiction writers. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, I was reading about how they used to bury people with a bell because they were burying people who were still alive so often, and they'd find like the claw marks on the coffins when they had to exhume people, and they realized that they had buried live people hundreds of years ago. So then the night watchmen in cemeteries were really there to hear the bells, to make sure there wasn't like a live person that was like hanging out underground. And I just thought that was fantastically creepy and interesting. And so and I've always loved Bosch, the painter who does the surreal, creepy, amazing, gorgeous paintings with the teeny little demons and people. And I think that's what inspired it, just like thinking of creepiness and thinking about Bosch. So I'll read it real quick if that's okay. It's called Bosch's Last Judgment. Rain invigilates. A few million of its minions are trapped on the window screen's glistening grid. If only all horror were petite, its detail completely surreal, one-dimensional, in the way words may explain an image into oblivion. You only die once, unless you have the luck of Jesus or Marat, but you get a lifetime to imagine it. Accruing more deaths each decade, you look for your ghosts through dark shards of rain-soaked oak, knowing these woods are forsaken as the living upon waking underground, their bell's small sound bound in the black box.
Wow. Whoa. Very good. Glad. All right, so let's see if we can take one more. Kathleen, have you disappeared from us? Oh, no, there you are. Majda. Let me get her back on. There you go. You got a case of, there we go. Rectangles going nuts. Let's see if we can, oh, here's a very long one, but let's see if I like this question. All right, this is John Johnson has asked the question. Kathleen says in her last poem, I trapped myself in wariness, yet the key was hidden someplace terribly obvious, under the only blooming thing on the front porch. It also seems to be hidden in the last line, this love of the first person passing. In other words, the first person singular, that person we mean when we say I. Can any of the poets say something about how writing and reading poetry helps free them from an excess of wariness? Who wants to take a stab at how writing a poem can free you from the excess of wariness?
Why don't we all answer it? And Henry, why don't you answer it?
Wariness. Well, wariness is it's kind of like an interesting word. And, one of the words that I come back to as we're going through this thing, I am so wary of what we're going through on the coronavirus front. And it has been, it has just been very, very long. So how that creeps into my work when I write, it creeps into it in a, I don't do it directly, but I don't mention it directly, but I can see in my own work the darker and more wary of elements coming into my work there. And also I'm doing longer and more, I guess, wary poems, but it is a trying time that we're going through. Okay, so anybody else have anything to say? I think we've covered all this great ground. I want to thank all three of you. You did just wonderful, and it has been a great night. That California sun seems to be coming down just a little bit behind your back out there, and here the light that you see in this room is East Coast light. So there's been a meeting of that of the sun from two different ways. So let me say goodbye to these poets, and then I will close the program. Okay, Luther, Kathleen, and Majda. Okay, so please join us for the next Poets versus the Pandemic on Wednesday, July 15, 2020, which will feature me actually reading from my new book, The Binary Planet. And please also join us on July 6, 2020, when Cafe Muse will feature poets Tracy Brimhall and Bergie Zenhauser. Let me thank all three poets, Kathleen Winter, Majda Gama, and Luther Jett, once again for a great reading. And let me thank the WordWorks and Cafe Muse for their sponsorship of this series. And let me thank all of you again and say, stay safe.